Alrighty, welcome back to my channel, Me Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we are here for part 3 of my 5-star audit. Now what that means is I made a list of all of the 5 stars that I've ever given on Goodreads, and we're going to go through this in a bunch of different parts. I think there's 6 in total, and decide if my reading taste sucks or if I still agree with myself. The last 2 parts actually came up with some interesting books that I thought I might like to reread and see if they still remain a 5-star. And that might be a fun reading vlog in the future, I think. Rereading books that I gave 5 stars to initially and I'm not sure about anymore. But basically it's just a way to see if my reading tastes have changed over the years, and if so, how so? For part 3, we are starting off very strong with The Veiled Throne, the 3rd installment in the Dandelion Dynasty. This is a full 5-star series for me. I love everything about this series. The first book is The Grace of Kings, which I think most people have heard of, and that establishes the lore and the large-scale picture and world that we are living in for the next 3 books of the series, if that makes sense. So the first book has more of a bird's eye view of things. We do get fantastic character work, as we always do with Lou, but when we get down into the details and the nitty-gritty of everyday character experiences, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th book give you that to you in droves. So I know some people who read the first book and they're like, this feels a bit too omnipresent for me, you know, it doesn't seem like it's as character-based as I would like. And to those people I would say that it does get that way later. But I don't think this is a series for everyone. But it certainly is for me. Everything in this series is for me. The Veiled Throne and Speaking Bones were actually supposed to be one book, but then the publisher was like, Ken, what is this monstrosity you have handed us? We can't actually physically bind this, so you have to split it. So the 2nd and 3rd book are meant to be read back to back, and I was waiting for the release of the 4th book, you know, because I was reading this as it was coming out. So I would actually really like to reread this and binge the 2nd or the 3rd and the 4th as they should be, you know, without the gap in the middle. But regardless, I adore this series, and I don't think this is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. This has been dubbed silk punk fantasy, and one of the main themes that Lou wrestles with in this series is, what if the concept of modernity was birthed in a society rather than Western society, rather than a Western culture? What if it was Eastern based? What if its origins, the idea of what we think of modernity, had different origins? And he really plays with that idea in so many different aspects. Linguistic aspects, technological aspects, warfare, cultural norms, everything is thought of in this series. So if you are reading through and you think, I wonder how this particular part of society would fall into this, you know, framework that we're working within, Lou's thought of it, and it's gonna pop up at some point. For some people, that much detail is not for them, and I get that. I really do. But for me, I ate this shit up. Next, we have The Heart of Betrayal, which is the 2nd book in the Remnant Chronicles series. Now, this is kind of lumped in with all of the other early 2000s dark boy fantasies, if you know what I'm talking about, like teenage girl dark boy fantasies, and I don't think it belongs there, personally. The first book does have some of the CW, like broody dark boy vibes, but what Pearson does with the series is what makes it stand apart, I think. I binge read the 3 of these. I could not put them down for the life of me. So while admittedly some of the details may be a little murky at this point, I just remember how much this book both delighted me and surprised me with what Pearson tackled in here. It's not just the romance at the heart of it, which is a big aspect of it, but it's also about cultural navigation, how different societies have to navigate coexisting together, and what sacrifices need to be made in order to make that happen. While I do think this would be fun to reread at some point, it's not a super high priority, but it lives in my memory as one of the best, like, early 2000s young adult trilogies I've ever read. Okay, next is The Voyage of the Basilisk, which is the third book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. Now, I don't have Voyage of the Basilisk physically, but now, after Seattle Worldcon, I do have A Natural History of Dragons physically. So I'm just going to hold this up while I talk about it because it makes me happy. But the actual cover is here, and it is so cool looking. This is another series that I think is so incredibly underrated. We follow Lady Trent as she is reflecting on her life. And her narrative voice is so distinct. She's so witty and sassy and has so much to say about the society around her at the time. Think Pride and Prejudice vibes, but with dragons as part of the natural landscape. Because the dragons in this series are not like ones that can speak telepathically, that you ride, that you engage with. They are creatures in this world to be studied by a naturalist. And Marie Brendan's world building chops as a fellow anthropologist are very much on display here. The world is so thoroughly thought out. If this, then this, if this, then this. You can tell a lot of work was done in the background to make the pages and the world on the pages really shine. And in each book, we go on a different adventure. So Voyage of the Basilisk, which is the one I'm technically supposed to be talking about right now, this one we go on a ship, a voyage, and we get to experience a lot of the sea dragons rather than the land dragons, which we've got in the first and the second book. So each book takes you to a new area of this world. But don't worry, they are all connected. There's a political landscape that becomes clearer the later in the series you get, and the final couple books really bring it all to a head, and you see what all these Easter eggs were for. Highly, highly recommend this series, and the audiobook is also phenomenal. Next is a nonfiction, which has quite a long title, so I'm just going to read it here. Infamy, the shocking story of the Japanese-American internment in World War II. This book made me angry, as it should. It should make everyone angry, because it's the story of how America got to the point where we were putting Japanese Americans in internment camps and stripping away their rights. I think it's very important to see the little steps that got us to that final point, and that we should be aware of when those steps are being taken. When you're reading accounts like this, it is universally accepted that what happened here was wrong, that it was taking rights away from American citizens who deserve the same protections as everyone else. And we always think never again. We always think this is in our past now, but we only learn from the past if we take the time to learn from it. And I think books are a really important way to do that. So if you want a nonfiction book that just tells the stark truth of what happened in this time of American history, I would highly recommend Infamy. I think that it was delivered in a way that wasn't dry, but that was blunt and to the point. Now, I had mentioned that this list that Goodreads generated of all my 5 stars sometimes groups series together, sometimes not. So, you know, the order gets a bit wackadoodle here and there. But this one was actually listed together, so I'll hold both up. But that is Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. This one, along with The Lies of Locke Lamora, is a series that I always say that I read before I really got into making BookTube. So while this is an all-time favorite series of mine, I haven't done a dedicated review or talked about it shortly after reading it, that kind of thing. It's just been a favorite of mine since I started making videos. And that's why I, splurged for this LitJoy beautiful edition of the series. I actually have to replace these dust jackets because they got scuffed and they sent like nice ones as a replacement. So I actually have to go ahead and do that. But I adore this duology. I actually heard someone call this romantasy the other day, and I actually yelled at my phone. I was like, it's not romantasy. Not that anything is wrong with romantasy, but I think that we really do different genres a disservice when we start lumping them all together, because that's how we get mislaid expectations. This does have romance in it, and a fantastic one at that, actually. But that's not the linchpin point of the series. It's about found family, about helping each other deal with the ghosts of your past and trying to move forward in a way that is sustainable. These are really heavy though, so I'm just going to hold up the first one. The first book is a heist where a bunch of different, rogues, disparate characters, disparate personalities come together to solve a heist. I'm such a sucker for that kind of plot line anyway, but the characters that come together in this story, Kaz, Inej, Jesper, all of them, just live rent-free in my brain and my heart. It's also interesting that it's one of my all-time favorite stories because Leigh Bardugo and I were very hit or miss, our relationship. I either adore her stories and they're 5 stars for me, like this one, and I think later on we're going to be talking about The Language of Thorns, another one I adore by her, at least in one at some point in this series. But then all the other books of hers are like a miss or something that I'm not interested in. I'm not a dark academia girly, so her dark academia series, what's it called? Ninth House. There we go. Ninth House, just wasn't interested in it. I did not like, oh, what's it called? Alina's the main character. I remember it because I hate her with every fiber of my being. The first trilogy that she ever wrote, it's not coming to my brain right now, but that was not for me either. Neither was the follow-up duology to that. I don't know. I either give 5 stars and absolutely adore Bardugo's work, or her and I don't mesh at all. But this duology is cemented as an all-time favorite. She's not going anywhere. Now this next one I actually do have physically, but I already packed it back up to go back in storage rather than put it on my shelves, which I think is sign enough in itself that I don't think this is 5 stars for me anymore. And that's The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I did enjoy this book. It made me happy when I was reading it, but when I think back on it, it doesn't, I don't know how to describe it, but for people who reserve 5 stars for books that are special to them, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't have that special je ne sais quoi, you know, that gives it the 5-star feels for me. So while I did enjoy it, I don't think it belongs on this list anymore, so I'm gonna have to make that shift. And I think it's gonna be a 4-star, a 3.5 or a 4. To be fair to my previous self, I think at the time, you know, I hadn't read any sci-fi, so the idea of like a space opera, human drama in space, it just really captured me and had sparkles in my eyes when I finished it. But yeah, upon reflection, I think it's gonna have to leave. Here's another trilogy altogether in the list, rare, but thank you Goodreads, and that would be Nevernight, God's Grave, and Dark Dawn. This is another series that I read before I was making videos, so again, I don't think I've talked about it a lot, but I was addicted to the series from the first page. It's about a bunch of assassins. It's a revenge story. There's also shadow magic, shadow companions. It's just delightfully dark. I loved everything about the series when I read it through the first time. I think it could be interesting to reread this as the reader I am now and see if it still holds the same weight when I'm reading it. But right now in my brain, my memory of this series is absolutely phenomenal. Also, this is the first LGBT main character that I really felt that I connected with on a personal level. And I remember the moment that I realized what was going on with this character, and I was like, oh, I feel so seen right now. So for that moment of connection and feeling seen alone, the series is always going to have, you know, a soft place in my heart. But I would definitely be open to rereading it in the future and seeing if any of my thoughts have changed. Next is a hard left in both vibes and language, and that is Hanazakari no Kimitachi e. This is For You in Full Blossom, or Hanakimi. I reread the first book in this edition ages ago, but I read it for the first time in English translation in high school, I believe, and it was one of my favorite shoujo mangas I ever read. I adored it. So upon reread, I only read the first volume, but I loved it just as much. So I have a feeling I'm going to continue to love this series. As with all long mangas, there are some installments that are not as strong. You know, there's always the beach episode, right? But this first installment gave me the warm fuzzies, and I loved it just as much as I did the first time. We follow our main character. I forget her name right now, actually, but she loves this high jumper athlete, and she's half Japanese, half American, I believe. And she goes to a boarding school and pretends to be a boy to get close to this high jump athlete and support him. Now, as I'm saying the words out loud, sounds really creepy, but actually that's not a strange premise for manga, specifically shoujo manga. So it didn't feel creepy to me when I was younger. But yeah, that's the premise of this, and so a bunch of shenanigans ensue because she is undercover as a girl. This is actually the last one I'm going to talk about in this filming session. I have to go be a mom for a little while, and then I'll come back and continue filming, so when things change, just be prepared for that. But before I go, the last one I'm going to talk about is A Gathering of Shadows. This is the second book in, I forget what it's called. It's V.E. Schwab series. V.E. Schwab, right? I don't think I'm crazy. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, A Darker Shade of Magic. I just remembered. That's the name of the series. It's famous. A lot of people love it. And a lot of people hate the second book. So in the same way that I'm a Mistborn Era 2 girly, I guess I am a Gathering of Shadows girly. And so I remember the covers of all the books. The first one and the third one, not for me. Second one, I loved. I'm a big second book lover, actually, because it really feels like we're living in the world that we've already built. And the end hasn't come yet, so I don't need to stress out. Like, we're just in the world, you know? So I remember just liking that vibe of this second book, that the characters are living in the world that we've created. And there's also a like gladiator style competition, and one of my favorite characters is entered into the competition, and I really enjoyed that environment. There's also a floating market, and I'm such a sucker for market scenes. Oh, and when it's floating, oh, so cool, so cool. That scene particularly, I think, gave it 5 stars for me. So while the first and third book in the series overall is like a 2.5 or 3 for me, this book carried those 2.5 or 3 stars for me. Essentially, this series follows 3 different parallel Londons. There's a black London, a red London, and a gray London, I think. And there's one main character who can go between the 3 different Londons, but you're not supposed to be able to, or you're not supposed to bring anything from one to the other. And of course, things go awry, and we go from there. This one's gonna stay on the list because even talking about it here, I remembered those scenes and how enjoyable they were for me at the time. So yeah, this is gonna stay on the list.
2 hours later.
Okay, we are back much later in the day, post doctor's appointments, nap times, and, you know, food pantry donations. Let's see if we can finish up this video. So I believe I left off talking about Gathering of Shadows, which is the second book in the Darker Shade of Magic series, and decided that that was going to stay with us. So next on the list that I see here is The Lost Metal by Brando Sando. This is a 5-star book for me. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. I even mentioned earlier in this video that I'm a Mistborn Part 2 girly. It just works better for me. I understand why people don't like it so much, especially if they loved the first era of Mistborn. It's extremely different. And if you don't like Wayne, who, you know, Wax and Wayne, their banter and the type of humor that Wayne embodies, then I could see this series really rubbing people the wrong way. But it works for me. And I also love Cosmere connections, and when we're starting to get more and more Easter eggs pulled in, and this book is just full of that. I tabbed the crap out of this thing, if it'll load there. And I loved making those Cosmere connections while reading. I was almost kicking my feet giddy with this book. So even if I reread it and it doesn't hit as strong because the Easter eggs are already revealed, that first just unadulterated joy that I felt reading this book is going to keep it at a 5-star. Next on the list is another series that's been split up because of the weird whatever algorithm Goodreads is using to generate these lists. But that is In the Labyrinth of Drakes. This is the 4th book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. Of course, the praise that I mentioned when talking about Voyage of the Basilisk and the first book hold true here. This is where some of that political landscape that I mentioned starts to be coalesced together, and you start seeing some of the bigger picture. Also, this is such a small detail, but I love that this hardcover edition, the text is like tan or light brown. I don't know if it's showing on camera, but the paper is cream and the text is light brown to match the color of the cover. It's just so cool. I love all the thought put into these editions. Next, we have Every Heart a Doorway. This is the first book in the Wayward Children series. Now, this had its heyday, I don't know, 5-ish years ago in BookTube, I think. Truly, everyone was talking about this series when it first came out. But I haven't really heard anyone talk about it in recent years. So this is a collection of short stories or novellas, I think novellas is the right term, by Shauna Maguire. The first one establishes the premise, which is that there's a school for wayward children who have gone into doorways, other worlds. Think Narnia, think, well, I guess anywhere really, but think of interdimensional fantasy worlds, right? So these children have gone through the wardrobe into a different world, and then they have come back to this one, and they're having a hard time adjusting to that transition, which is such an interesting premise. And this school is a place for them to go and recover. So each novello following this follows a student as they reflect on their time in that world, or maybe go back to it. It depends, based on the novella and the character that we're following. But the first 3 books in this series were bangers. Everyone was obsessed with them, myself included. The first 3 are 5 stars. Then since then, every year in January, McGuire releases a new one. I'm about 2 behind at this point, which is just a crime, because while not all of them are 5 stars for me, there has been at least one more, and in Absent Dream, that was 5 stars. I think that's the 5th book, and it's about the Goblin Market. Phenomenal novella. So even though every one isn't 5 stars, the potential for there to be a 5 star is so high that I don't know why I fell behind on these, honestly. But the first one that, like I said, establishes the premise, this is also a murder mystery, is Every Heart a Doorway. She's not going anywhere. The next book I see here is The Beauty of Darkness, which is the 3rd book in the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. Since I talked about Heart of Darkness before, I don't really have much extra to say, except for I feel that Pearson really, truly sticks the landing with this 3rd book. And I do need to get a copy of these to have on my shelves. Next, we have White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. This is another nonfiction that I read. This, like Infamy, is easy to read. It's not dry, but it does not shy away from the truth of what our country was built upon, which in more cases than you probably realize is white rage. You see it in housing policies and voting restrictions, and even if those things are not technically written in law to this day, the whole point is that you can see the echoes of that rage in today's world. And it's important to be aware of where that came from so that we can address it nowadays. I think this is an extremely important book to read, and it's going to remain 5 stars. Next, we have The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. Now, this is technically a 4.5, rounded up to 5 on Goodreads, but I'm talking about this in the 5-star range, as I have with other books in the Broken Earth trilogy, because I think as a whole, as a package, it is just a phenomenal piece of literature. So I'm just going to read a quote from my review here, because I think it sums up my feelings for this book particularly well. Almost as if I wrote the review myself, who'd have thought? But it says, if you want quick, concise answers, this book is not for you. But if you want a heartbreakingly stark look at humanity and the suffering we can inflict upon each other in times of strife, as well as a few brief moments of beautiful human connection, this book is phenomenal. I completely stand by that. This book is not a feel-good book, and it doesn't rush to give you the answers that it knows you want. It makes you wait. And the reveal is more than worth it in the 3rd book, and the reveals you even get in the 2nd book. But as a whole, the Broken Earth trilogy, even though no particular individual book was 5 stars, I think that as a whole, the work of literature there is a 5-star set. Next, we have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. She's staying, I already know. This is so far outside of the range of things that I care about and want to read about most of the time. It is a starlet talking about her life in Hollywood. I even in real life don't care about actresses' names. It's just not, it's so far from like the scope of what I'm interested in. So this sounds like a book that I would not enjoy. It is so phenomenally written. The end of this book, the twists that come up, it had me crying ugly tears. And to this day, I can still remember the visceral emotions that this book got out of me. I think it is a stellar example about how any genre can work for you if it's written well and done right. And this is a perfect example of something that typically wouldn't be for me, but done so well that I have no choice but to give it 5 stars. Next, we have House of Earth and Blood by Miss Mass. I've talked about this, I think, in a recent video because I hauled the 2nd book, which I despise. This 1st book is 5 stars, though. I'm just going to believe that this is a standalone. This is Mass in all of her strengths. The female friendships, the romance, the character building, the slow burn, all of that is done so well here. And the environment is also new for her, as it's urban fantasy, not a full separate fantasy world. So Okay, so this time my camera died. If there's any other fellow content creators out there watching this video, you know when a piece of content just feels like it's not trying to be made? That's this video. I'm determined. We will get this done. So I believe where I was that I was talking about House of Earth and Blood. And I think I was talking about how this book is mass playing to all of her strengths. The character work, the friendships, particularly the female friendships, and the unique setting, or at least unique for her, in it being an urban fantasy rather than a completely separate fantasy world. I think that she was just in her pocket, you know, she was doing all of the things that she excels at in this book. And it made me cry. I was so distraught at what happens to a particular character here. And then the female friendship that's at the core of this story ends up being a linchpin point later. And that came through so strongly for me that the finale of this book had me in tears again. It is such a phenomenal book. It's absolutely staying at 5 stars. I just wish it was a standalone, honestly. With yet another series being out of order on this list, we have the second and the third book in the Every Heart a Doorway series. Second one being Down Among the Sticks and Bones, and third one Beneath the Sugar Sky. These two are also 5 stars, as I mentioned when I was talking about Every Heart a Doorway. In the second installment, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, we go to this very moody, dark, vampire, gothic, Frankenstein vibes world. The vibes are immaculate, and McGuire's writing really shines here. In Beneath the Sugar Sky, it's an opposite style world where we enter a nonsense world where it's very Alice in Wonderland-esque. Things are topsy-turvy on purpose, like they're not supposed to make sense. And even though I struggled with Alice in Wonderland itself, something about having a character who belongs there as a connection between me and the world allowed me to settle and feel involved in this environment much more than if it was just me reading the world straight up. Does that make sense? So while this would definitely not be the world for me if I were to go through a wardrobe of sorts, I really enjoyed being in this world through the lens of someone who it was meant for. The next one is Buffering Unshared Tales of a Life Fully Loaded, I believe is the full title. And this is an autobiography by Hannah Hart. This I read ages ago. Like way before I was on BookTube. I love Hannah Hart. I loved her My Drunk Kitchen series. Just something about her being comforts me as a person. She's very much not in the limelight anymore, or maybe she is and I just don't engage with her content anymore. This book and my love for Hannah is very indicative of like the 2010s area of my life. While I still think I would thoroughly enjoy a throwback watching a My Drunk Kitchen, I think I've just outgrown a lot of the people that I watched at the time on YouTube. I remember enjoying this book, but I think that there's a lot of bias, of course, in that I really loved this person at the time, so hearing about their life was interesting to me. But I don't remember anything particular about the writing or the way the story was told that would keep it at a 5 star nowadays, especially considering I don't have the same parasocial relationship that I had when I first read it. I think this is another one that I'm going to have to drop off the 5 list and bring down to a 4. I'll keep it at a 4 just for nostalgia's sake right now, but to be honest, I don't remember any particular details about the book. So I think if I were to reread it, it might even be lower than a 4, but for now we'll just bump it down to a 4 and take it off this particular list. Next up is a Junida work, so you know it's going to be 5 stars across the board, whether it's his art or a story that he's written. I just love everything the man touches. If you don't know, Junida is my favorite Japanese artist and author, and the one that we're talking about today particularly is Home. This is a collection of his art that just shows different whimsical homes tucked into little crevices made out of interesting materials and environments that you wouldn't think could make a home. I'll show a couple pieces here, but here's one for all of the book lovers, which is everyone watching this video, I assume. Here's one where the roof thatching is made of yarn. And one of my favorites, I don't know why this one sticks out to me so much, maybe because I couldn't imagine a home being here, but here's a home nestled into a trumpet. And this is another particular favorite of mine, which is a home on a billowing sheet of children at play. I think that is so whimsical and cute. So Junida's work reminds me of a fairy tale. It has the whimsy and the pure joy that can come from children's stories, as well as a darker edge. His later work has more of that darker edge to it. This is an earlier work, so it has more of that unfettered, light-hearted whimsy to it. Next on this list is The Hate U Give. I read this back during its boom, and it was serving as a linchpin point at the time for a lot of the really important real-world conversations that we were having about America's racist roots and the systems of power and how they function today. So while the book itself might not be a 5-star upon reread, based on the fact that it's a more young adult, contemporary book, and those tend to not remain 5 stars for me at this point in my life, just the writing style and the setting, and it just doesn't mesh with me as well. I think I will keep it here because of the cultural significance and the watershed moment that was this book, and all of the subsequent conversations that were had that wouldn't have been had without it. So I think it deserves its place on this list. I'm not sure if I'm interested in going back and rereading it though. Next on here, I have The Dead Djinn in Cairo. This is a phenomenal little short story. It's in the Dead Djinn universe, which is written by P. Djeli Clark, the most well-known, I think, installment of the universe right now is A Master of Djinn, but there are many other short stories and novellas in that world. One of them being The Haunting of Tramcar 015. I talk about that book a lot, and that'll probably actually come back up in one of these videos if it hasn't yet. I don't remember if it was in part 1 or part 2. Regardless, every installment outside of Master of Djinn actually has been 5 stars for me in the Dead Djinn universe. So Dead Djinn in Cairo is a police procedural that takes place in an alternate history where Cairo was never colonized and it becomes a world power. And Clark is a master of short fiction alternative histories. He's very good at taking a point in which the river of history kind of forks off and he says, we're taking this route. And if you then follow that to the next step, okay, if this happened, then this probably didn't happen and this might have happened. And then he might even tie that in later with a couple little lines that you're like, oh, okay, so that means that this did happen. So if this happened, then this, right? So you are building the world in your brain without him having to do it for you because he's dropping these little points throughout his short fiction. He's masterful. He is so good at what he does. So this is no exception, but it is also very fun because it's a police procedural. We follow an investigator who comes across a dead djinn, and she's called in to figure out what happened to him, and she works with her partner to try to navigate that. Obviously there's magic present because there are djinn everywhere. There's also like a Men in Black vibe because she works for a department that works on coordinating the magical and non-magical aspects of society, right? So it's so good. If you haven't read anything in the Dead Djinn universe, I highly recommend it. But this one, unfortunately, doesn't have its own physical rendition. You have to get it via ebook. But best believe if it is ever available physically in some cute little format, I will be snapping that up right away. This next one needs no introduction on my channel, and that is The Ninth Reign. This book swept through all of my books in 2023 and took the top spot. It was the last book I read. It was the best book I read. The prologue of this book alone had me hooked. I actually have a whole long-form discussion about this series with a fellow booktuber who is also phenomenal, by the way, the Bookish Blackwell. I'll have that link down below. Oh my god, I just realized I haven't been plugging like any of my other content that has to do with the books I've been talking about. We have a page-toing interview with both P. Djeli Clark and Marie Brennan. I will have both of those linked down below as well. But back to this. If you want to check out more about my in-depth thoughts about this series, that whole first section of that conversation with Bookish Blackwell is spoiler-free, so you can go check that out. But this is such a unique series, and I would like to see more people talk about it, honestly. Second to last book on the list here is the last installment in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, and that is Within the Sanctuary of Wings. I've talked about this series twice now already, so I don't have much more to say except for look at this stunning cover. And also the writing is like a dark purple, like burgundy. Again, attention to detail to match the cover. Delightful. Now the final book on this list is The Armored Saint. I know that I have this physically, but for some reason it's not here right now, but I do have the second and third book in the series, so I'll just hold them up in its place. But here's The Queen of Crows and The Killing Light. I really want to get to both of these because I read The Armored Saint ages ago and I loved it. I devoured it in I think one sitting. It is extremely dark. Another memory card filled up, if you could believe it. Oh my god. Okay, let's just finish this damn video. So I was talking about the Armored Saint. If you know the darker aspect of Joan of Arc, the story of Joan of Arc, it very much has those vibes. So we follow a young peasant girl who has everything very violently taken from her. It's a very heart-wrenching scene, actually. And in this world, there are some soldiers who control giant mechas, but not like Transformer, Gundam-style mechas. Like here, you see like traditional armor-looking mechas, like those kinds of vibes. And she ends up taking on that mantle, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure. I remember some of the visceral fight scenes in the book, and I remember loving the main character. But it has been, I probably read that back in like 2018, maybe 2019. So it's been a hot minute. And I bought these like soon after reading it because I loved it so much and just never continued. So I would definitely like to continue on with the series. But as far as I'm concerned right now, that's staying at a 5-star. So before something else happens that keeps me from finishing recording this video, I'm just gonna do, in summary, any changes that are happening to my 5-star list after reflecting on these. Looks like most of this list is gonna stay here. I have 2, I think, that I'm moving down, right? One was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and the second one was Buffering, Unshared Tales of a Life Fully Loaded. So I think those 2 are gonna be moving down to the 4-star range, but the rest of these are gonna stay. Outside of always wanting to reread favorites, there are a couple that I would be particularly interested in rereading. I would say the Remnant Chronicles, the Nevernight series, and the Wayward Children series would be the 3 that I'd be most interested in picking back up again and seeing if my current reading affects the way that I felt about them. So let me know in the comments down below if some of these surprised you, if you disagree with my thoughts on some of these. Maybe they're 1 stars to you, even though they're 5 stars to me. Have you ever done a 5-star audit? If so, let me know how that went and if you came to any realizations about yourself as a reader. I find that every video I do of these, I realize something new. So we'd love to hear any of that down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. I'd love to have you as part of this community, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jenny!